Give us a measurement on this Monday morning, John, of the force and power of Mr. Putin.
Well, he suffered some severe setbacks so far in almost 6 weeks of war in Ukraine. There's no doubt about it. The Russians obviously miscalculated the extent of Ukraine's resistance, which has been heroic, and they miscalculated the capability of their own military, which has had one failure after another from the strategic level on down to simple logistics like food and gasoline. Now, all that said, they still control a considerable amount of Ukrainian territory. Yes. And it looks like they're trying to get their act together, regroup, pursue more sensible objectives. I'll have a piece up on 1945.com a little bit later this morning. It says, I think what many are also saying, they're going to go after the Russophile areas of southern and eastern Ukraine.
Right.
And let's remember, when we come to negotiations, which we're not in seriously yet, but when we come to it, the more land Russia holds, the harder it's going to be to get them to give it up.
John Bolton, I want your perspective as we talk to Admiral Stavridis as well about what has been underreported, in my opinion, which is the land grab along the Black Sea. What should be the American response to the territory taken down to Odessa?
Right. I think this is a central part of what Putin's objectives have been, in which, frankly, if he had focused on the South and the East at the beginning of the war on February 24th, he might already have. Putin wants the entire north coast of the Black Sea. I don't think there's any question about that. He wants Odessa, wants all that territory because he thinks it's strategically critical to Russia and because it will landlock Ukraine. So either things that have been coming through Odessa into Ukraine now will have to pass through Russian tolls and pay for it, or they're going to have to completely switch their trading routes through Poland and Hungary and other Eastern European countries. It will give Putin enormous strategic leverage over Ukraine. And as I say, why he didn't go after it first, I don't understand.
I want to turn, Ambassador Bolton, to the reality. You came out of Yale. You worked with David Keene. You worked with no relation to me, I should point out. You worked with a Republican party that wasn't afraid to project. Then you worked for Donald Trump, who had his unique isolationist tendencies. Describe the new American isolationism. Describe the new GOP isolationism.
Well, I think there's always been a strand of isolationism in the Republican Party. I think it's actually broader in the Democratic Party. It takes a somewhat different form. They think the world's going to be saved by multilateral organizations like the United Nations. That's kind of delusional. But the Republican delusion is that none of this overseas, none of this in Ukraine has anything to do with us. I think it has everything to do with us. Our way of life depends on interests scattered all over the world. And the isolationists in the Republican Party don't see that, don't see anything worth defending. They'd find out when they began to disappear. But I am actually hopeful. I think the isolationist strand in the Republican Party has shrunk almost back to historic low levels. I think Biden's catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan last summer was a major factor there. And I think if you look at Republican views on assistance to Ukraine in the current conflict, you can almost see those two events pushing the party back to its real Reaganite foundations for the contemporary world.
So what would be an appropriate response from the United States, or for Europe for that matter, for alleged war crimes in Bucha and other cities in Ukraine?
Look, this is there's little doubt, based on the evidence we had, of real barbarity on the part of the Russians. But look, it's nothing new for them. They've done this in Syria. They did it in Chechnya. And so we shouldn't have been surprised by it. But I'll tell you something. None of this intimidates Vladimir Putin or the Siloviki, the men of power around him. These are the hard men of history. You can threaten them with war crimes, prosecutions, all you want. It's not going to slow them down in the slightest. I think I've written on this extensively for over 20 years. These international criminal court type operations do not deter these things from happening, and they're very rarely able to administer punishment. This will have to come when Russians get control of their government again and take actions, if they desire to, against the people who committed the crimes in their name.
Okay, so if Vladimir Putin has proven time and again that he is not capable of being deterred, that deterrence tactics to this point have not worked, What will he respond to? Does use of force need to be on the table? And when the U.S. and other countries like the UK today, for example, saying that they don't want to escalate, they don't want to be escalatory, what would escalation actually look like? How far can they take it?
Well, I think Putin would have responded to adequate deterrence, but he hasn't seen any of it. You know, there's a lot of nattering by leaders of NATO countries about how united the alliance is and so on. And yet we can't get the leader of the free world to agree to the transfer of Polish MiGs to the Ukrainian Air Force. He said again yesterday it would be World War III, which it certainly would not. The West clearly failed. This is a shame that we will have to bear in not being able to deter Putin from starting this invasion.
John, that was very rude and undiplomatic of you, as you've been called before. Let's drive the conversation forward to what to do now. Are you advocating that the Secretary of State needs to take the Bolton rude and undiplomatic and be more assertive, more aggressive? Or can we have a grace to our diplomacy as we force what America wants?
Look, I think we have been plenty graceful with our allies, and we're still not getting them to do enough. And we're not doing enough either. I think if you listen to some Europeans, the British in particular, that they say we're constantly being dragged along by Europeans like themselves, urging us to do more, or pressure from both the House and the Senate, Democrat and Republican alike. The fact is, if Putin retains territory after this is over, he has won. And his effort to reestablish Russian hegemony and maybe even sovereignty in the space of the former Soviet Union has been very patient.
I don't mean to cut you off, but this is too important, John, right now, and that is a new domino theory moving from Russia west. Are you suggesting there could be a domino theory here if he takes some of Ukraine?
Yeah, he already has some after the 2014 invasion, to which we did not respond effectively, and he's obviously going to try and get more. He's got plenty of other targets beside NATO countries within the space of the former Soviet Union, but if you ask the Poles, if you ask Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they are deeply afraid that they're very high on the Russian target list, and an ineffective, indeed feckless Western response will simply encourage Putin.
Okay, so that's looking west. What about to its other border with China, Mr. Bolton? What role do you think China is playing actively or inactively here?
Well, I wrote in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago, I think Russia and China have an entente here. It's not a full-up alliance, but it's an understanding. I think China has Russia's back in this conflict, and they'll expect Russia's back when they launch their aggressive actions, whether it's against Taiwan or more in the South China Sea or elsewhere along their periphery in the Indo-Pacific. Right now, I think what the Chinese are doing is making their financial institutions available to sanctioned Russian banks and others to, in effect, launder that money back into the financial system. And I think although China already purchases significant amounts of Russian oil and gas, they'll be happy to purchase more if we had an effective embargo, which we don't. So these are the kinds of relationships. It doesn't require military assistance from China. Economic assistance is very important. And you've got other major countries like India, which, according to press reports, quadrupled its purchases of Russian oil in February.
John, I got to get this in. It's too important. In this conversation, you mentioned we should not worry of World War III, and perhaps we should not worry of Mr. Putin and his nuclear abilities. How do we manage that? How do we develop a confidence that we will not find some form of world war?
Well, I'm not saying we shouldn't worry about it. Of course we should. But right now, we failed to deter Putin, and he's deterring us. And I think if he can get what he wants for free without effective allied response, he's going to be encouraged to do more. I think providing the Polish MiGs is actually a pretty small piece here. We're now in a race of time with the Russians. We've got to get more military assistance to the Ukrainians. We should be doing a lot more. I think a lot of options we had are off the table. Biden gave them away in early December when he took American force away as an option. By the way, got absolutely nothing for that. So we're constrained by what's gone before us, but I think we should be absolutely clear here. If we allow Russia to get a major part of its objectives in Ukraine, we have suffered a significant defeat.